Hello guys, so now we shall be discussing regarding the Brodmann areas within the cerebral cortex. So the Brodmann has divided the cerebral cortex into 50 areas. Okay, so we shall discuss what are those 50 areas over here. Okay, so the topic of today's discussion would be Brodmann areas of cerebral cortex. Brodmann areas of cerebral cortex. So this Brodmann areas of cerebral cortex are divided into 50. But now what we have to do is that we will divide the cerebral cortex into two parts. Cerebral cortex into two parts. Okay. What are those two parts? One is called as the neocortex, another one is called as the allocortex. Okay. One is called as the neocortex, another one is called as the allocortex. So what is neocortex? Around 90% of the cortex which you have is considered as the neocortex. Only 10% of the cortex is considered as the allocortex. So neocortex is around 90% and allocortex is about 10%. So what is the important thing you need to know? Neocortex has got around 9 layers, whereas allocortex has got only 3 to 5 layers. Neocortex has got 9 layers, right? Whereas the allocortex is around only 3 to 5 layers. But the majority of the cortex which we have is the neocortex. Second important thing you need to understand over here is that one example of allocortex which is just 10% is nothing but your olfactory cortex. Your olfactory cortex is nothing but called as a allocortex. So coming to this allocortex, one example I can give is, what is that cortex which is just 10%? What is the allocortex which is 10%? That is your olfactory cortex. Olfactory cortex comprises of only 10%. Okay, so that is around how many layers? That is around 3 to 5 layers. Right, so now what we shall do is that we shall discuss what are the Brodmann areas that are located in the cerebral cortex, specifically in the frontal lobe. But before we discuss what are the Brodmann areas of the frontal lobe, first of all, let us draw the entire cerebral cortex, and there I will explain what are the different kinds of gyrus and sulci you have got. So regarding the discussion of gyrus and sulci, I have already discussed in a previous video. So now I will discuss only about the sulcus. Okay, what are the different kinds of sulci you have got in the superolateral as well as on the medial view. So what do you mean by superolateral and medial view also I will tell you. Okay, right. So first we shall discuss about Brodmann areas of the frontal lobe. Brodmann areas of your frontal lobe. So what are the different kinds of Brodmann areas you've got in your frontal lobe? So we will divide the frontal lobe, whatever it is, the entire cerebral cortex into two parts. See, this is your cerebral cortex. Now in this cerebral cortex, this side which you can see, this side is called as a superior lateral surface, and this side is also called as a superior lateral surface, right? Now there are two superior lateral surfaces, one on the right, one on the left. Now when I divide these two cerebral hemispheres, this is one right cerebral hemisphere, this is your left cerebral hemisphere. When I divide these two cerebral hemispheres inside like this, whatever you can see, this is called as a medial part of your cerebral cortex. So within the cerebral cortex, you've got one is a superolateral surface, another one is the medial surface. So we shall draw what are the sulci that are located in the superolateral surface, and then we shall draw what are the sulci that are located in the medial surface, and then explain the Brodmann areas of the frontal. Okay, so first let me draw the picture of the superolateral surface. So this is your superolateral surface. Within your superolateral surface, you see that here you have got a sulcus laterally, right? This sulcus over here is called as a lateral sulcus. Okay, actually lateral sulcus has got three important parts. What are those three important parts? Look here. This lateral sulcus goes forward like this. This is called as anterior part, and next it goes upward like this. This is called as the ascending part, and then it goes posteriorly like this. This is called as a posterior part of the lateral cortex. Okay, so it has got three rami in the sense branches. So what are these three rami? One ramus is anteriorly present, one ramus is ascending up, and one ramus is posteriorly present. So this is called as anterior and it is horizontal, right? Anterior horizontal rami. Another one is your ascending rami, and this rami over here is called as your posterior ramus. So this one is your anterior ramus, this is called as your ascending ramus, and this is called as your posterior ramus. Okay, so these are the rami which you basically have. Now I will write down the names later on. So next important thing is that here exactly in the central you have got a sulcus here. This sulcus over here is called as your central sulcus. Okay, so this sulcus over here is called as your central sulcus. Okay, now just in front of the central sulcus, you have got another sulcus. So any sulcus which is located in front is called pre or post. It is called as pre. So this is called as pre-central sulcus. So this sulcus over here is called as your pre-central sulcus. Okay, for example, if I draw a sulcus that is located behind the central sulcus, then this will be called as post or pre. This is called as post central sulcus. This is called as post central sulcus. So how many sulcus we have discussed here? We have discussed one is called as the central sulcus. Next we have got is the pre-central sulcus, and finally the post central sulcus. Okay, right. If you look here in front of the central sulcus, whatever you can see, this entire part is called as a frontal lobe. Okay, what is this entire part called as? Frontal lobe. And by the way, in this superolateral surface you can see three poles. What are those three poles? See, this pole over here is called as your frontal pole, this pole over here is called as your temporal pole, and this pole over here is called as your occipital pole. So frontal pole is there, temporal pole is there, occipital pole is there. Now we will discuss about the frontal. Now here two more important sulcus we have got. So all of you know that this is your frontal lobe. Within the frontal lobe, I am drawing one sulcus on the top, another sulcus on the bottom. So if I draw one sulcus on the top, that is called as superior, which is located in the frontal lobe. So frontal, and this is sulcus, superior frontal sulcus. So this one over here is called as your superior frontal sulcus. Okay. Next, this sulcus over here which you have got is your inferior frontal sulcus. This is your inferior frontal sulcus. Next important thing. What is this lobe of your cortex called as? This is called as your parietal, right? So within the parietal lobe, what I am doing is that within the parietal lobe, I am going to draw one more sulcus like this. Okay, so this sulcus is dividing the parietal lobe into two parts. See, this is called as the upper part of the parietal lobe. This is called as the lower part of the parietal lobe. So this sulcus which I am drawing in between the parietal lobe is called as intraparietal sulcus. Okay, so which I am drawing within the parietal lobe is what is called as intraparietal sulcus. Intraparietal sulcus. Now let us come to the temporal part. Within the temporal part also you have got this entire lobe is your temporal lobe. Within the temporal lobe, what I am going to do is I am going to draw two important lines. One line on the top, one line on the bottom. Okay, so this line which I am drawing on the top, this is called as superior temporal sulcus. So this one over here is called as your superior temporal sulcus. Okay, and this line over here is called as your inferior temporal sulcus. So one you have got is a superior temporal sulcus, and the other one you have got is a inferior temporal sulcus. Okay, right. Now let us go to the occipital lobe. Within the occipital lobe, you have got many sulcus. For example, within the occipital lobe, you see this sulcus which is located over here. This sulcus over here is called as your calcarine sulcus. Okay, so this sulcus over here is called as your calcarine sulcus. This is your calcarine sulcus. So above the calcarine sulcus, you have got this structure like this, right? So this structure is a half moon shaped. So that is why this is called as a lunate sulcus. So this structure, this sulcus over here is called as your lunate sulcus. Okay. Now above the lunate sulcus, you have got one more sulcus like this. Below the lunate sulcus also you have got one more sulcus like this. So what is this sulcus that is located above here? This is called as upper polar sulcus. Okay. This is called as upper polar sulcus, and obviously this should be called as your lower polar sulcus. Lower polar sulcus. So two sulcus you have got here. One is called as a upper polar sulcus, another one is called as a lower polar sulcus. Right? Now, next important thing is that you have got another sulcus that is located exactly in the center like this, which is transverse. You see, it is transverse in nature. So such sulcus you call it as a transverse sulcus. So this sulcus over here you call it as a transverse sulcus. Transverse sulcus. Okay. So these are the sulcus which you need to know within your superolateral surface. Now, after this superolateral surface discussion is done, now what we shall do is that we shall come back to this picture again, right? But before that, what we shall do is that we shall draw few more sulci that are located on the medial surface. So let me draw the medial surface and again come back to this picture. So this is the medial surface. How am I telling? Because in the medial surface down here, I have got a structure, and this structure over here is called as your corpus callosum. Okay, so this structure over here is called as your corpus callosum. So this one over here is called as your corpus callosum. So what is corpus callosum and all? What are the structures that are associated with this corpus callosum in detail I have discussed previously. Okay. And remember one more important thing, that just beneath this corpus callosum, you've got one more structure in this way, and this structure is called as your fornix. This structure over here is called as your fornix. Okay. Right. Now, you see the central sulcus here. This central sulcus, actually it is continuing. For example, this is the superolateral surface. Here exactly in the center you see a central sulcus like this. You see, this is a central sulcus. Actually this central sulcus is continuing on to the medial side also a little bit. Okay. So this central sulcus from here this central sulcus will jump on to the back, and on the back side also it continues downward like this. So this is also called as a central sulcus over here. Next, just behind this central sulcus, you have got another sulcus like this. See, there is another sulcus that is going all the way and goes and attaches like this. So this sulcus over here is called cingulate sulcus. Okay. So this sulcus is your central sulcus. This is your central sulcus, and this one over here is called as your cingulate sulcus. Cingulate sulcus. Okay. Just behind the cingulate sulcus, you have got another sulcus like this on the medial side. Okay. Now don't confuse that telling that this is intraparietal sulcus. See, intraparietal sulcus is this. This intraparietal sulcus is located on the superolateral surface. This is the medial surface, and this sulcus which you can see on the medial surface is called as suprasplenial sulcus. Why it is called as suprasplenial sulcus, I will tell you in a minute. But just remember that this one over here is called as suprasplenial sulcus. Okay. Next, surrounding your corpus callosum also you have got a sulcus like this. You see, surrounding the corpus callosum, this sulcus is called as callosal sulcus. This sulcus over here is called as your callosal sulcus. This is called as your callosal sulcus. Okay. So these are actually, there are much more sulcus which you have to know here. So one last important sulcus which we shall be discussing is in the occipital lobe. So for example, here you have got one sulcus, and here you have got an other sulcus like this, right? So what is this sulcus over here? This is called as posterior occipital sulcus. So this sulcus is posterior occipital sulcus. If that is posterior occipital sulcus, then this one is called as calcarine sulcus. Calcarine sulcus. We have already discussed, right? What is calcarine sulcus in the supralateral surface? So this is your calcarine sulcus. Just beneath or parallel to this, we have got one more sulcus here, and this sulcus over here is called as collateral sulcus. Why? Because it is collateral to the calcarine sulcus, right? So this is called as collateral sulcus. Collateral sulcus. Now, just beneath this corpus callosum, there are much more sulci we have to discuss, but this is not needed right now. What you need to know is that, so this is your superolateral surface and this is your medial surface. Now, when we discussed about the Brodmann cortical areas of frontal lobe, when we discuss about the Brodmann cortical areas, okay, Brodmann cortical areas of the frontal lobe. So Brodmann cortical areas within the frontal lobe are divided into two parts. So what are these two parts? One is called as the prefrontal area. Another one is called as the precentral area. So there are two important areas over here. One is called precentral. Another one is called as the prefrontal. So we have got the precentral. I will show all this in the form of a picture. One is called as a precentral area, and the other one is called as a frontal area. One is called as a precentral area, another one is called as a prefrontal area. Now, when it comes to the precentral area is also divided into two. What are these two important structures? One is called as a motor area,